I want to thank you for joining us today. Today we have artificial intelligence, also known as AI, export regulations with our expert instructor, Margaret Cassidy of Cassidy Law. Before I do hand it off to her, I do have some quick housekeeping announcements to go over. We're going to have some passwords throughout today's session. When those passwords pop up, it's going to look like this poll that you see now. So it's going to kind of take over your screen. For those passwords, please make sure you write them down. That will be how you receive credit for attending today. If you are seeking CPE, CLE, CLP, anything like that, you want to make sure you write those passwords down because you'll input that into the password survey. If you have any questions about password certificates, if you can't find the password survey, feel free to email me at joshpina@publiccontractinstitute.com. If you have any questions about CLE, you'll email Joshua Lee. Both of our email addresses are in the chat. So if you look at the top right of GoToWebinar, you'll see chat. That's where you'll find information about today's course. To the right of that, you'll see questions. If you have any questions for Margaret, you'll put those in there. If you have any questions for me regarding, again, password certificates, if you notice the audio or video isn't working appropriately, please let me know there so we can get that rectified for you right away. Finally, if you haven't had a chance to download the materials, to the right of questions, you'll see a little piece of paper with a paper clip. That is a PDF version of the deck that Margaret will be going through today. So this poll I have up here is artificial intelligence is. We have a couple of choices there. 3 people are watching out for Skynet, so that's very wise of you. A lot of people are using AI as a tool, so that's perfect. That's what I use it for. Margaret, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Josh. Folks, I just wanted to introduce myself quickly, and then I'm going to go off the camera. But welcome. Hello. Nice to meet everyone. Thanks for attending. Thanks to Josh and the folks at PCI for welcoming me to do this. We're going to cover artificial intelligence related to export regulations. So that is it. I urge you to ask questions and share ideas. This is all, new stuff, and would love to hear people's approaches or to hear people's questions. And Josh, if questions come in, could you read those off? Because my view is set up right now where I'm just seeing the slides and not the questions. I'm now going to go off camera, everybody, and start walking through the presentation. My contact information, and then a quick overview of what we're going to cover. We're going to cover export regulations sort of generally, an overview, simply because that will give us the context of the U.S. approach around AI, and then we'll move into AI export controls themselves. This is all a changing landscape, as I'm sure all of you already appreciate. Okay, U.S. export controls. I wanted to give an overview here on this. So, and this is, again, the context for the AI controls that we're going to see later. So it's not just AI that controls, and probably most of you know that. The US government controls a lot of other innovative technology, sensitive technology, military items or dual use items, and it's done primarily to protect intellectual property as our businesses operate globally. It is also done to prevent sensitive technology transfer to our adversaries. And you're going to hear that a lot through this time together, because that is a huge policy driver on where our AI technology is going to land, and in preventing it from getting it into the bad hands. Overall, U.S. export controls are designed, their goal is to protect U.S. national security and our foreign policy interests. And that dovetails with our need to protect where our technology goes, protect the innovation that's here in the United States. So that's sort of the purpose of export controls. There's generally 2 export control systems or regimes here in the United States. The U.S. Department of State has a Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, DDTC. They're the ones that regulate and oversee the export of items that are on what's called the U.S. munitions list. The scope of DDTC is defense products, defense technology, defense services, and the regulations are the international traffic in arms. They have a more narrow area of control. The items on the U.S. munitions list, the items that are controlled by DDTC as defined in the ITAR regulations, really is only focused on defense items. A key thing here to keep in mind is that even if you never export a defense item, but it's on the US munitions list, you must register with the Department of State. A lot of businesses get confused about that. They think, I only sell to the US federal government, I only have US employees, all my operations are in the United States. So therefore, even though I'm making a defense product and selling a defense item to the United States government, I don't have to do anything because I'm not quote unquote exporting. The regulations under ITAR say you register once you've figured out that you have a defense item. The other regime is Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security. This is the Export Administration Regulations. This is what we're going to cover today because that is where there were some new controls put in place related to AI. They have the Commerce Control List that is massive and includes all the items that they control. This is dual use items. It could be a commercial use or a military use. They have very broad areas of control, and then there are times when you need a license. You do not have to pre-register with the Department of State. You just have to, in fact, be exporting, and your product or service, etc., needs a license. Okay, this is key as we think.
Margaret?
Yes?
Yes? I do just want you to know that your camera is still on. I know you
were saying it is? Oh, well, I don't know how to
on.
turn it off. I'm on my screen here, and I have it kind of X'd out on the screen. So here I am. Hello, everyone. That's all right with me, I guess. Okay, thanks for letting me know, though, Joss. Okay, subject to the EAR. This sounds like a weird term, like subject to the EAR. EAR being the Export Administration Regulations. Subject to it means when is something covered by the EAR? When is something controlled by US export regulations? Well, there's some easy ones on this. A US origin item. You develop software, you develop a product, you develop technology here in the United States of America, it's going to be subject to US export regulations. If something is sent from overseas, like a product, think about a product that's easier, at least in my mind, than things like intellectual property, etc., software. Think about a product getting mailed from some other country and or shipped from other country and landing in the United States of America. When it lands here, it too now is subject to the US export regulations. Same thing if there's software. You know, a lot of clients of mine will think, we'll develop software over in Romania or somewhere overseas, and then that software or that software code won't be subject to the US jurisdiction, and we'll start selling it, and we're a US business. Even that is still going to be covered by US export regulations when it gets here to the United States. So this sort of takes me into something else. Foreign-made products of US origin, like the technology, the software, or the manufacturing process, is a US origin. Like it came from US innovation, came from US ideas, US capabilities. I'm going to highlight on this one because we're going to hit at some point this current administration's approach to managing AI and some of their big policy initiatives. One of their big policy initiatives around managing artificial intelligence, as well as the super duper, very cutting edge chips and integrated circuits that are needed to have AI actually work. The administration said that if stuff is getting developed overseas, AI related either models or chips or something else that is related to artificial intelligence that helps it operate, if it's foreign made, the US is going to take the position of being more aggressive that that product is going to be subject to our export regulations. So just to give you an idea in a more concrete way, and I'm going to use a physical product for you to understand this foreign made product rule. Think about you are a US company, you come up with some technology to manufacture a product. And that product that you're going to manufacture is some sort of export controlled product, night vision goggles, for example. You came up with that technology in the United States, and not only did you come up with the technology in the United States, you also came up with a manufacturing process that you've developed in the United States that's really efficient and gets the job done. And then software related to that product was also developed here in the United States. But now you decide you're going to manufacture it overseas because it'll be less expensive. So you start manufacturing that item overseas. And although the night vision goggle never gets created here in the United States of America, it gets created in some other country. From soup to nuts, the whole thing gets created over there. But it was US technology that gave the guidance on how to create that item. That item is still going to be a US item pursuant to US export control regulations and have to comply with US export control regulations. And I always tell myself around the export laws and regulations, if you think on what the policy is and why we would have a regulation, this one makes really good sense. Like, you don't want a US company trying to evade US export regulations by thinking to themselves, I'm going to develop the IP, intellectual property, and the technology and the software here in the United States, but I'm not going to actually create it here in the United States. I'm going to send it overseas to create it in an effort to evade export regulations, and then I can ship it wherever I want in the world. The answer to that is no, because of the foreign direct product rule. Similar to that, if you make something overseas and you have more than a small amount, de minimis is the lawyer way of saying small amount, and if you have more than a small amount of US export controlled content in that product, that too is going to be subject to US export regulations. And then anytime you sell an item into the United States, even if it is not manufactured here or developed here, anything, it's still going to be subject to our export control regulations. That's how we get control, or that's what items are controlled by US export regs. And like I said, just going back to the foreign made products, this administration has said in their AI policies that they're going to be more aggressive about when AI is, or AI related chips or something of that nature is being developed overseas, being more aggressive around saying that is a US product, even though it's getting made over in the outside the United States. Okay, moving along. As we talk about this, I've been using the word item. I use that and select that very carefully, because as we talk about this and we talk about exports, think to yourself, not just a physical hard thing like a product or software. Export control regulations touch on technology, technical data, equipment, goods, even materials. Some materials and composites of materials can be export controlled. Biogens can be export controlled, software, and then kind of the technology or the technical data that would give instructions to somebody on how to run some sort of, or operate some sort of export controlled item. Those are all export controlled. Those are all things that can be export controlled. So it covers it covers anything. It just doesn't have to be a equipment or a product or a software. It covers, exports can be anything. Okay, export administration regulations, we talked over those quickly. I'm going to do a little bit more here. They're non-military items, so they're items that can be used maybe civilian and military use. The list of items that are controlled are listed on the Commerce Control List. Don't think just list, right? Think massive, massive, massive list. Thankfully, the Commerce Department, BIS, has put out what they call their interactive Commerce Control List. And the link to that is at the end of this deck, so you can go there and toggle yourself through. The items that are controlled by what's called Export Classification Control Number, and it's ECCN. So when you know an ECCN, you can go, you can go figure out how your item is controlled. And then when an item is controlled, it generally means you need to get a license, and the license depends on for what reason your product is controlled, where it's going, who the end user is, and what the end use is going to be. And then last, there's a ton of license exceptions, and we're going to hit one license exception that applies to AI. Okay, here is the Commerce Control List. This is not the list. It is the categories of the list. So these are the categories of things that are controlled under U.S. export control regulations. AI stuff is controlled here under electronics. That's category 3. It's controlled under computers. That's category 4. It's controlled under information security. That's category 5. Oops. And that category number is usually the first number of the ECCN. That first number, so electronics is 3, computers are 4. Within each category, the way you conceptualize it in your mind is there's A, which is systems, equipment, and components. B, test, inspection, and production equipment. Materials is C, software is D, and then technology is E. So when you look at an ECCN number, the first number or first digit of an ECCN number will be the category. We'll tell you which category it's in. If it's computers, it's 4. Then it'll tell you what group. Are they controlling equipment? Are they controlling software? If they're controlling computer software, software related to computers, it would be 4 being the computer, and then it'd be D, telling you it's the category group of software. Moving along here, international traffic in arms. We hit on this. It covers defense articles, defense service, and defense technical data. It is the categories for here are what are called the U.S. munitions list. The key here is it must be specially designed for military use. And we already talked about registration. If you're going to be a manufacturer, exporter, or broker of a defense item. Here's an important thing to know when it comes to AI, and this is how I will tie AI to the U.S. munitions list or to ITAR regulations. AI is controlled generally under the Export Administration regulations, the dual use stuff, and it's on the Commerce Control list. It can be a ITAR controlled item when it is specifically used for a defense article, okay, where it's integrated into a defense system. Once an AI capability is integrated into a defense system, that is, it's part of the defense system. Like you make an AI-enabled drone, right? That AI then, for that particular drone and that particular defense use, is then going to be covered under ITAR. But an AI model by itself, without having a specific integration or connection to a defense thing, is going to be controlled under export control regulations. That's what I got to say on ITAR and AI. Moving along, just for your reference, here's the categories of what's controlled on the U.S. munitions list. So if you develop, something on this list, right, and the item on this list that you develop has some sort of AI capabilities integrated into the article, integrated into the thing, then it's going to be controlled by ITAR. Okay, here's another concept to think about as you think about AI in particular. It is exporting includes, for example, it doesn't mean just moving software or moving a product outside of the United States. It can be that shipping or transmitting an product or data overseas out of the United States is certainly exporting. But releasing controlled technical data or releasing controlled software to a foreign person inside of the United States is also an export. It's called the deemed export. So let's say you are a US company, you have AI modeling that is export controlled, and now you have somebody from France working in your company here in the United States. They are a French national citizen here working in the United States, and they get access to your AI modeling. If that modeling is in fact export controlled, you have just exported AI to France. So that's another way of thinking about it. Providing services can be considered an export as well. You send folks overseas to train them on how to use your AI solutions. That is technical services, technical data, technology that would be considered a transfer as well. And then uploading controlled data or software or an AI model to a server, that is accessible to, let's say you're an international company, accessible to your employees worldwide, you've just done an export then as well. So when you think of export, it's really broad and you need to have a big concept around that. So a couple, I'm going to give a couple definitions here because software is controlled when it is itself controlled or when it itself is related to a controlled item. So if we have integrated circuits that are controlled integrated circuits that meet certain capabilities and they're used in AI, that because of their power and their unique capabilities, any software associated with using those integrated circuits or using those chips is also going to be controlled. And the regulations for us define software as a collection of one or more programs or micro programs fixed in some sort of way that you can express and use the software. I also have on here the definition of encryption, because encryption items, things that provide encryption, software that is encrypted, so software related to AI modeling that has encryption may itself, even if the AI modeling is not considered not considered controlled because it doesn't meet the parameters of the regulations, the software that enables that, if it has certain encryption capabilities, may be a regulated item because of the encryption. So if you provide encryption capabilities in any sort of software that is used to ensure confidentiality, ensure security, all of those sorts of things, that software itself may be export controlled. And I get this question a lot from folks. Well, I'm only using open source, the open source libraries to create my encryption for my software. It is generally still then a controlled item if it meets the requirements for when encryption, software with encryption is controlled in the export regulations. Because if you go to an open source library and you use that library to develop your software, particularly your encryption capabilities of that software, the export regulations say your software that you're developing, even with open source encryption capabilities, is now considered, quote unquote, a new item. So if you've pulled encryption code to develop your software and put it into your software, even though it's from a publicly available site, you've now created a new item that itself is going to have to be reviewed for export control. Also including the definition of technology, because technology, sometimes you can conceptualize export as a software, like I'm allowing access to my software, or a product export helps you conceptualize exporting. But information around your product, information related to your software, it is also controlled if that information is necessary for the development, the production, operation, maintenance, whatever you want, word you want to insert here, for your controlled software, for your controlled product. If there's information around how to use that controlled software or that controlled product or that controlled component, then that information related to how to use that thing, how to develop that thing or produce that thing is also controlled itself. And technology could be in any form. It could be written or oral communication. So explaining to someone, if you have an AI model that is export controlled and now you're defining how to use it, how to operate, how to install the capabilities on somebody else's computer system, you're doing it all verbally, that is a technology that is controlled. Blueprints, drawings, engineer design, manuals on how to operate something, all of these sorts of things are also technology. And I already said it can include technical assistance. All right, moving along here. We talked about licensing. Under the ITAR, you have to do it once you have it. And then, whoops. And then for AI, where did I go? What's going on? Oh, hang on. I'm going the wrong way right now for a moment. Let me go back. Okay. For export for when you need a license, it depends on how the item is classified, who the end user is, and the end use of the items. We're going to talk about screening of parties because even if you get an export license for an AI related capability, you get your export license and you're all good to go, you still need to make sure you know who is going to touch that product, whether when it goes in transit or who the end user is, and you need to know where that product's going to land and who's going to have access to it. And you've got to screen all those people. That's a big part of this administration's controls around AI export. And I have on here, you're responsible for wherever your item goes. So if you create some sort of AI model, and then you sell a license to that, and you get so people can access it and use it. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way again. Access it and use it. You are the one with the obligation to make sure that persons who are not covered by your license, who are not covered by an exception to a license, or who are prohibited through export regulations from accessing that stuff, do not get access to your AI model. Do not get access to integrated circuits or chips or anything like that. If you're making it and you're exporting it, you have to know where that thing ends up and who uses it. Okay. Moving on to AI specific controls. So back in July, this administration put out a document, and I believe I have a link to it at the end here. They call the document Winning the Race, America's AI Action Plan. And this action plan was put out by Trump, and it details what he expects the US government executive agencies to do as it relates to AI. This is a little bit more policy, but the policy informs the export controls related to AI. And this is sort of the introductory statement acknowledging that AI is a transformative technology, and it has the ability to impact global relationships, have impact on our national security, and our ability to be at the forefront of technological domination. So therefore, they've put out this action plan. The action plan has 3 pillars. Accelerate AI innovation in the United States of America. And if you look at this document, the AI action plan, you'll see the steps that the White House is directing the executive agencies to do to try to elevate and accelerate AI innovation in the US. Next pillar is building AI infrastructure in the United States. Again, the action plan details what the executive agencies need to do to support AI infrastructure. What do they need to do to help get data centers built and other similar types of things to facilitate an AI a construct here in the United States so that AI can both be developed through innovation and then effectively used across our society. Then the third pillar, and this is where export of AI falls, is the third pillar is the Trump administration directed that the US should be leading in international diplomacy and international security as it relates to AI, and sort of taking the lead on making sure that there is great innovation sharing around AI, but at the same time taking steps, i.e., for example, export controls to make sure that it doesn't fall in the hands of bad actors. Onward we go. Josh, would you like to do your code at this time?
That is perfect to me. Our first password is up now, and that is machine, capital MACHINE. Machine is your first password. I'll leave this up for about 15 seconds or so. As a reminder, everyone, if you are seeking credit for attending today's session, please make sure you write these passwords down. That will be how you receive your CPE, CLE, CLP credit. If you're just seeking a certificate of completion, certificate of attendance, you will receive that automatically from GoToWebinar roughly 24 hours after we wrap up today. Again, that first password is machine. Margaret, it is all yours.
Thank you. Okay, tying this back to the Trump administration AI action plan, we're focusing on pillar 3. And these are the policies that the Trump administration wants to see, or the policies directing the tactical and strategic actions that the executive agencies need to do to both make sure that export of AI is done in a way that is strategically significant, protects our interests, but also is thoughtful. So what are the policy goals around how AI will be exported? First off, deny adversaries access to vital AI resources. This isn't only AI modeling capabilities, but it's also denying them access to chips and other computing capabilities that would give an adversary the capabilities to run an AI model or to effectuate the use of artificial intelligence. It can't be done alone. It needs very complex, very sophisticated chips, very sophisticated computing capabilities. And so one of the policy initiatives is to develop US export control policies that will deny or limit adversary access to AI resources. The next policy initiative is that as the government does this, Trump has directed executive agencies to collaborate with industry on a couple of things. On developing the controls that should be in place, but a really unique one that I included here is working with industry so that as they develop advanced AI compute and develop advanced chips, that industry uses its technological and innovative capabilities to build those products and that software so it has verification features so that in the end the chips are not going in a country of concern. The next sort of policy initiative is as chips are going on around the globe, being exported around the globe, especially the ones that are controlled because of their sophistication, conducting investigations to determine where these chips are being diverted to. Interesting factoid that I learned from a colleague of mine on a recent export presentation that I did on chips getting, going around the globe. He has been hearing that washers and dryers, refrigerators, stoves that are smart refrigerator stoves, washers and dryers that may have more sophisticated chips in them are being sold seemingly innocently into certain countries, especially the stans, and then those smart household appliances are getting exploited and the chips are being removed and sent to places where that chip is not supposed to go. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to investigating where chips be diverted to, and then also combining with working with industry to give some sort of verification features in those chips so you can see where they land, or verification on you can see where any software or other capabilities land. And then last, the White House has directed that it is going to enforce, it's going to increase enforcement of export compliance. So in other words, prosecute those who violate US export control laws. So then on a more sort of positive side, and what they're going to do around export controls is the US appreciates that there's a global demand for AI. So the US wants to facilitate methodologies to export effectively and keep out of the hands of our adversaries the full AI technology stack. So the hardware, the models, the software, the applications, and the standards. So the Trump administration in this document has directed that agencies figure out how to effectively export the full AI stack. The Trump administration in its policy has also directed US executive agencies to collaborate and join alliances with other countries around how the full AI technology stack will be export controlled. So working with our partners and allies. They want to make sure that any exporting of US technology related to AI is going to be free-flowing enough, if you will, so that our allies or partners don't start depending on US adversaries for access to elements of the AI technology stack. And again, there's a direction here around export for the US government to work with US industry to figure out how to develop the full stack. And then once developed, the US government is going to work to develop security requirements. And then the agencies, federal agencies, are directed to take actions to limit Chinese influence on AI governance globally. So there's beginning to percolate and in place around the globe different governance models. This isn't necessarily export control type of thing, but how to govern the use of AI. And the US government wants its agencies to take the lead on governance models and try to limit the Chinese influence on governance models under the theory that Chinese will develop a governance model around how AI can be used or should be used in a way that's favorable to their capabilities and their technology. And the document put out by the Trump administration says that he wants the US to take that lead. A big part of this is working with partners and allies. I already sort of discussed this a little bit. Here's where it's in this document that I mentioned that the foreign direct product, that the Trump administration said it will use the foreign direct product rule, as well as tariffs to manage innovation outside the US. So again, if stuff is getting developed outside the US, the Trump administration is affirmatively saying we're going to try to get control of that innovation that is being developed outside the US using the foreign direct product rule, which we discussed earlier, and then also try to control it through tariffs. Agencies have been directed to develop methods to share information with allies and partners around AI protection systems and export controls to both protect innovation and supply chains related to AI, particularly integrated circuits and chips and that type of thing. And they want US agencies to work with allies so that they're not providing US adversaries with US export controlled technologies. And then this sort of all comes together by the US agencies coordinating with allies, coordinating with partners to adopt US export controls around the AI stack that are very similar to our controls, so that our adversaries cannot work around our export controls by going to purchase items on the AI stack from other countries that don't have the robust export controls around chips, around computing technology, and around AI modeling. So these are sort of the plans around working with allies, working with partners to help control the export of the AI stack. Just as an aside, and Joshua talked, and I talked about a bit about this before, in the quantum computing realm, this has already been achieved. So we have export compliance requirements that mirror a lot of those of our partners and allies around the world, and that's an effective way to sort of control innovation. Okay, so finally, here we are on what I call a new export controlled item. There it is, export classification number 4 means it's related to computers. E means it's technology, and 091 is the number applying to AI models. So what is controlled? This number here is the number that is for the control of closed weight AI models trained with high computational operations on regulated chips. All right, I'm going to stop there because that's a lot. It says a lot. Okay, so it's not all AI models, right? It's AI models trained on regulated chips. We're going to get to this a little bit later. This export control around AI models dovetails with the controls around regulated chips, the chips that are needed to do this kind of AI modeling. And so that is what is controlled as far as an AI model, but you need to look at how chips are regulated. You need to look at how integrated circuits are regulated as well to figure out what in fact is an export controlled item. Okay, so if the model has been published and is widely shared, or it was developed and trained using published information, there's a chance it may not be controlled. So said another way, if your AI model is trained using publicly available information published widely, then it is generally not controlled. So how do you know if your AI model is controlled under this export control number or not? You can either self-classify your AI model by going and looking at this export control number on the integrative commerce control list and looking at how this closed weight AI model trained with high computational operations on regulated chips is defined in more granular detail, and look at the definitions and the requirements for this type of AI model to be controlled, and do your own assessment and say, my business, my company has just self-classified our AI model, and we've determined that we are controlled for these reasons, or we've determined we are not controlled for these reasons. You could do it that way. Also, BIS has a methodology for any export controlled thing where you can actually go and ask them for a determination, and you say to them, here's all the information about my AI model. What do you guys think? Is it controlled or is it not controlled? That's a big analysis you got to undertake internally in your company on how to approach that. Okay, so one of the definitions, let me just go back here. One of the definitions of this export, this AI model that is controlled, that's important, is what are the parameters of your AI model? And for this export control number here, it's not moving forward, there it is. It defines a parameter as any value learned during the training, the network weights, biases, and they're also known as model weights. So you have to look at your parameters or your model weights to determine and make that assessment of whether your AI model is actually controlled or not. Another big important definition in this AI model export control number is operations, and it defines operations for you as mathematical operations used for the training, both pre-training and subsequent training, and then fine-tuning of your training of the AI model. It does not include collecting or curating training data, and training operations should account for operations required to perform all steps of the training of your AI model. Again, whether you're using published, that's publicly available data, or non-published data in your training for your AI model is also a big factor of whether your model is controlled or not. So bottom line, go look at the ECCN number, look at the capabilities of your product, look at these definitions, and look at how an AI model that is controlled is described, and see if your features of your AI model fit the description in the export control regulations. If the export control regulation, that ECCN number we just covered, describes your AI model, it is going to be export controlled. If it doesn't describe it, then you're not export controlled. If you don't know, you can go ask BIS. Okay. Also, semiconductors are controlled because they are critical in the manufacturing process of semiconductors are controlled because they are a vital part of effective and capable and high functioning AI models, right? So as a result, the US controls semiconductors, controls critical components when making a semiconductor and the process for manufacturing semiconductors. In the Trump administration's guidance on AI, it says that currently the US and its close allies hold a near monopoly on the critical components and the processes for making semiconductors. And the goal of the US is to continue to have this near monopoly. It's also a goal of the US to continue to lead in this innovative space when it comes to semiconductors. They explained that it's vital to national security that the development, the production, and the manufacturing process of semiconductors be controlled, as well as the components that make a semiconductor. And so right now, US and allies control major systems when it comes to making a semiconductor, but some of the subsystems are not necessarily controlled. So Trump has directed the agencies to develop more export controls around subsystems when you're manufacturing a semiconductor. That'll be forthcoming. That is sort of an AI-related export control. Okay, some more AI-related export controls, right? And the big thing on this slide, you guys, is that I have listed the ECCN numbers around things that are controlled as because they're related to AI. But again, remember, like this ECCN number 3 ending in Z controls integrated circuits. This one 3A controls integrated circuits. This last one here controls computers and electronic assemblies and, well, components that contain certain integrated circuits. And then down here, it's the software and the technology. The huge thing for you all to remember on this is they're not saying that every integrated circuit is controlled, every computer or electronic assembly is controlled. Instead, you need to go look at these ECCN numbers, and the ECCN number will describe the parameters and the capabilities of the integrated circuit that is controlled. So if an integrated circuit has these sort of capabilities, these high-level parameters, then it's very sophisticated, cutting-edge innovation, it's going to be a controlled circuit. If it doesn't, then it may not be a controlled circuit. And so same with computers and electronics and components that include integrated circuits, right? So don't take this slide and say, oh my gosh, all integrated circuits, computers, electronic assemblies are controlled. No, they have to fit how the export regulations describe what sort of cutting edge or innovative or critical technology an integrated circuit or a computer needs to have in order to be controlled. But these are the numbers that are primarily related to AI because these are the chips and then the software and technology that gives a computer the capability to run an AI model. Okay, whoops, did I jump too much? Okay. All right, so moving on. We talked about this before a little bit. So for AI models, the AI export controls have stringent requirements on exporting AI models or chips or software to certain countries if the end use is going to be for a military purpose. So you have an AI model, and the end use of that AI model is a military type of use, surveillance, targeting, autonomous weapons, intelligence analysis. That AI model is going to not be authorized for export to certain countries. I don't have those countries listed, but I bet most of you can guess what those countries will be. It's a long list of countries, and if you go look at the export regulations, you'll see that list of countries. So it's like Chinese, Venezuela, Russia, countries of that nature. You cannot export AI models, chips, or software if it's going to have a military end use. AI technologies are also restricted if the end use is going to be related to nuclear weapons development, missile systems, chemical or biological weapons, nuclear maritime applications. So I have this on here because even if you think to yourself, okay, my item is export controlled, so I'll just go ahead and get myself an export license. There are certain countries where you cannot get an export control license, especially when the end use of the item of your AI model or certain chips, certain software related to this is in fact going to one of these countries or going to this end use. And remember, when you think about who your end user is, but not even your end user, where your product or items may transfer or who may touch, the US has restricted countries. Example, China has some restrictions. Iran has uber restrictions. We have restricted parties, individual human beings. We have restricted entities, and then we have restricted uses. So even if, let's say you have an AI model and you look at the regulations, you're like, my AI model is export controlled. However, I can get a license because my AI model is going to be used in France. Okay, that's fine. You've done part of the analysis. France is not a restricted country for the most part, but you still have to look, what is your user going to use it for? And who are the parties or entities involved in using your item? If the parties or entities involved using your item are restricted parties or entities, you're still not going to be able to export that item. Okay, There is an AI authorization license exception, and the license exception basically allows for the AI model weights, advanced chips, related software and technology to be exported to certain countries where we have very good relationships with our ally countries. And the rule is if you're going to do this sort of export and avail yourself to not needing an export license because the export is going to go to specific countries where we have an ally relationship or a partner relationship with, then the entity who's going to, or the person who's going to get the advanced chip or the AI model or related software and tech must be headquartered in or have the ultimate parent headquartered in the country that we have a good relationship. And then you have to have your end user and anybody in the transmission process certify that they know export regulations and they're going to follow them. You need to give your end user the ECCN number of the export so that they know what they got to do to comply. And then you have to make sure that the end user and you are complying with export regulations around secure storage. So your end user, let's say again, we'll use France again, you're going to give access to an AI model that you've developed that is export controlled and it's an entity headquartered in France, and the French have agreed to follow our export regulations. You still have another step. You have to make sure that the French folks that are going to get your AI model are going to have secure storage around that model, whether it is cybersecurity, physical security, or security around the AI. And the regulations define those standards for secure storage of AI chips, AI related chips, or AI model weights. So you got to check that too. Okay, in our last couple moments, compliance strategies. How do you pull this all together and actually make it practical day to day if you in fact maybe have AI related stuff that's export controlled? Okay, conduct a risk assessment. And by that, I mean simply think about what your products are. What are your products? What are your AI models doing? How are they being developed? What are their capabilities? What are they going to be integrated with? If you're making chips, what are those chips capabilities? If you have computers, what are those computers capabilities? If you've got software, what are those software capabilities? Look at your products, your software, your technology, all of it to see, do US export laws comply? Apply to them. Do you have an export controlled item? If you do, is it a defense related item? So is it an AI model that's integrated into a defense item? If it is, then do you have to file with the Department of State? If it is export controlled, do you need a license? Or is there some sort of license exception available to you? I just gave you the one on artificial intelligence. There's a license exception. Is that available to you? What do your contracts say with your business partners if you're buying AI related stuff? What do your contracts say? Those contracts will give you a hint if you're buying something and that item's export controlled, or it should. Have you done due diligence on your business partners if you have an export controlled item or you have critical technology? Do you know who your business partner is, the end user, the end use, who's going to touch your product, any part of transport? And do the deep dive on your business partners. The AI guidance that has come out of the White House gives a bunch of categories on how to do due diligence on your business partners, red flags to look for. I'm hoping to be able to get to that. Also, look at your own contractual terms. Do you need, if you have export controlled items, do you need to put a clause in there that your end user, those who are transmitting your export controlled stuff, you got to put contract terms in there that say they know the export regulations and they're going to follow them. And then make sure that you have good controls, and then always mark your intellectual property as being yours. Okay. Compliance strategy, we talked about due diligence. That's key. That's a big bucket of something you got to do. Review your contracts to make sure you understand what regulatory obligations you may have if you're buying AI export controlled stuff, but then also make sure your contracts have export control regulations if you're selling export control stuff. Internally, internal controls, policies, procedures, training, what your leadership understands about your products. And this is basically a compliance program, right? Like, and the export regulations say this, that if you have an export controlled item, whether it's ITAR, or EAR, you need to have an internal program to make sure that ultimately your export controlled item is in fact controlled by you as a company. So what are your policies and procedures around how you hire people and what nationalities you hire and how you ship stuff or how you transmit software, where you have your software code developed, how your AI model is being trained, what is it being trained with? Like, you have to develop all of these policies and procedures so that you can control your products, your software, your technology, so that it doesn't violate export regs. And as part of anything that you develop as a policy or procedure, you need to train your employees and make sure that your leadership understands these requirements as well. Okay, due diligence. So BIS has a lot of good information on red flags, like what you should be looking out for when you're getting ready to do a business transaction with somebody and you have export controlled stuff, AI stuff or otherwise. Who is the business partner? Where are they located? What is your client profile? If you have an export controlled AI model and somebody wants to buy it, do they have the complexity and the sophistication to understand how to use it? Or is it seeming that they're sort of like very unsophisticated, would not generally be users of this item, and perhaps that's a sign that it's going to end up somewhere else? Make sure that you know who you're selling it to and make sure you understand their business structure, right? If you're selling it to an entity, do they have joint ventures? Do they have other business partners? Do they have divisions or subsidiaries where your product could end up going? How are they generally around their compliance with laws, etc.? And you need to look at all these things as you make sure of transmitting some sort of export controlled item to a third party, customers or otherwise, doing business, developing an AI model with another party. You have the obligation to do due diligence on them, and the regulations make that clear. Here are some resources that I've put together here at the end. Here's the interactive commerce control list where you can go in and you can look at the ECCN number or look at the items that are controlled. It's interactive. You can jump around to the different sections. Export regulations are very dependent on the destination of the item. So the US government has country groups. So there's country group A, there's country group D, and these country groups list who can get, say, an AI model, who can get an a sophisticated chip. And so when you look at your ECCN number, it'll tell you in there what countries you either don't need a license for, you need a license, or you can never, ever, ever sell to. And they at BIS have created an interactive country group list. But you've got to look at the ECCN number, and the ECCN number will tell you the country groups that are allowed to get that item, or that you need an export license to get that item. Here's the link to the to the AI action plan that we just talked about, that we've talked about throughout this whole thing. And then here's where you could find the actual export regulations. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joshua and quit sharing my screen, I think.
Sorry, Margaret, I did not realize I was muted, so I was talking to myself for a second there.
That's all right.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Margaret, for putting together today's training. I want to thank you all for joining us for the last 60 minutes. Again, our second password is up now, and that is learning, capital Learning. Learning is our second password. That's our final password for today. Leave this up for just a few more seconds here, and we're going to have one final pull up, and that's going to be please rate this training excellent, very good, good, or fair. As a reminder, if you're seeking a certificate of completion or attendance, that will be sent out by GoToWebinar at around 11 a.m. tomorrow. If you are seeking CPE, CLE, anything like that, you will need to save these passwords that you've seen today and input them into the password survey on our website. So log onto your account, go to My Courses and Certificates, and input the passwords there. Margaret, I don't see any questions.
I don't either. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.
Sorry, I think I cut you off. I cut you off twice. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Thanks, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Maria and Rose, for the little clapping hands. I appreciated everybody very, very much. Oh, look at those coming in. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And Joshua, for your help, wonderful. Couldn't do it without you. You know that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Margaret. We did have 2 people just raise their hands.
Sure.
I'm not sure if they meant to kind of do the clap there also. But if you do have a question and you raised your hand, please feel free to put that into the question section before we do leave today. If not, you have my email address in the chat there, but you also have Margaret's on the slide deck. So her contact information is there as well. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.